the questions. It's illustrated fiction. Covers a lot about writing craft books, art aesthetic. In other words, the process rather than the product. Welcome to Softwoods ASMR. I am so excited to make this video. I received such amazing questions, such thoughtful questions. I'm going to answer those questions, and I'm going to reference quite a few books I have here throughout the video as well. I also hand wrote the questions and put them in these envelopes, so it will be very fun to open these with you and read the questions as we go along. It seems that so many of us here, in addition to enjoying ASMR, are also book lovers and readers, and some enjoy writing and the writing life, whether writing in a journal or working on a book or anything in between. So let's begin. I'll open this one. This video was requested a few months ago by a viewer who left a very perceptive comment and also asked, I would love a video that goes more into your own perspective and experiences with writing. And that's from Dream Landing. Thank you so much for requesting this video and for asking about my perspective and my experience with writing. I have been working in the arts and the publishing industry for several years. I have held quite a few roles. Working for publishers, over the years, the publishing industry has changed so much since I started out. And of course, this is largely to do with technology advances. When I started out, writers still submitted their manuscripts via snail mail. They would print their entire manuscript or proposal and put it in a large envelope So a manuscript can be thick, right? So, and so that cost a lot to send in the mail. So they'd put that large envelope and send it through the post. Today, most publishers, if not all, accept via email or through a form on a website. I pursued publishing because of my interest in books and in writing. Over the years, some of my own writing has been published. All of my experience in publishing is with traditional publishing. I don't have any experience with self-publishing, but I think self-publishing looks really interesting and potentially cool. In the beginning, I published works that appeared in newspapers and magazines and on websites. I'm just going to keep writing my answers out, keywords here on the back of the question. So my works appeared in newspapers, in magazines, and on websites. And later, my assigned projects additionally involved writing books for publishers. These are not what I would call well-known works by any means. They are fairly quiet and niche writings. I'll share more about that as we go along. I'm just going to have a little sip here. Tonight's tea is rooibos chai, which if you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I drink a lot of this type of tea. So let's move on to the next question. Just leave this as well. Here's a wonderful question, or series of questions from Sailor Jane. How does one get started writing longer pieces? How do I organize my ideas to make a story come together? A good example of storytelling. Thank you so much for these. There are lots of ways to go about this. Going about writing longer pieces, but I would suggest two things. One is to come up with a very short, rough working synopsis. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. So, with a rough synopsis, which will likely change as you actually write your story, you can include a hook, if you've thought of one, that is, a protagonist, protagonist or main character. And a conflict. And this conflict is something that the character is up against that is getting in the way of their goal. So you can study book blurbs of your favorite novels as examples. And once you've written a very short, 3 sentences or a paragraph, a very short synopsis, you can use it as a guide to start thinking about your first chapter. And then the next. And the other idea I have when you're first beginning a story is to think of building your story in tiny pieces at first. To think of one scene at a time. When I sit down to write, I have a little notebook by my computer. And I jot down just a few things that will happen in this scene. And the key is just to write down a few things, not to go into too much detail in that little notebook. And this helps me stay focused and avoid writer's block. So, focusing on one scene at a time, using a notebook to jot down a few things that you'd like to tackle in that scene. There's so much more to say about this, but I hope that helps a little bit. So this person also asks about examples of good storytelling. Writers will always do best reading widely within the genre they write, but I've picked a few classics and a couple of more recent works that really stand out to me and who have wide appeal across genres, but they might not be everyone's taste. I'm leaving so many favorites out, but I'm sure I'll have opportunities to share them in future videos. I tend to read contemporary, historical, speculative fiction, and magical realism. And in my opinion, some of the best storytellers of all time are Margaret Atwood, Virginia Woolf, Toni Morrison, Franz Kafka, Donna Tartt, and Heather O'Neill. And I'll just show you a couple of books I pulled off my shelf. Really great storytelling in these two books here. This book has come up in some of my previous videos, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. As I say, I think this has really wide appeal. And this one, I'm going to say that Heather O'Neill is one of my favorite storytellers. And so I will come back to this in a minute because there are other questions related to this. And I have other books by Heather O'Neill as examples. to start moving things around a little bit here. This is for later, these ones up here. Okay, so these questions, and now let's move on to the next question. These series of questions are from Bree_R. What type of texts do you write? Do you have a writing role model? Is there a place we can read your texts? These are great questions. Thank you so much. I've written a lot of different things. In the beginning, I wrote articles, and I conducted and wrote interviews. So I wrote articles, and I wrote interviews. I also submitted short pieces of creative writing. I did this alongside working for publishers and working on bigger projects such as books. And mostly in the realm of academic writing, but not always. Sometimes creative works as well. And these days, I'm focused on writing fiction. Though I do write a little nonfiction as well. Since I absolutely love this ASMR world, I want to keep it separate from my job and my career. So I'm likely not going to share my published works here, but I have thought about writing pieces specifically for this channel in keeping with the ASMR aesthetic. I'm thinking about that. I'm not sure if that idea will come to fruition or not. As for my writing models, I have so many writers that have influenced me and whom I admire. So I think that I'll say that my role models have been writers who write against the grain. It's more of a general answer. Writers who write against the grain, both in their fictional worlds that they create and in their own lives, who push against perhaps the conditions or time periods or the worlds they were born into, and who nevertheless made space and time against all odds to work on their craft. That said, I will get into mentioning a few specific authors as we go along, answering more of the questions. So I will move on to the next question here. one is from Diane. Did you have a particular experience that lit your writing spark? A teacher or class? A loved one's encouragement? And do you have a piece you are most proud of? I love these questions, which really delve into the past. As a child under the age of, let's say, 10, I was very interested in writing. I loved having a diary. And my first diary had a little lock and key, and that symbol of privacy really awakened me to the idea that I could write things down, my thoughts, just for myself. So I had a diary. I also loved writing poems, and I even loved doing writing research projects when a teacher would assign a study topic. I had one teacher, she was so amazing. She went way beyond the curriculum and taught in such a creative way. She incorporated so many interesting artistic ways of experiencing curriculum, and some of those activities were quite experimental, as in experimental art. So that kind of introduction to seeing the world and expressing in a variety of ways really aligned me with my own desire to express and create. This teacher took notice of my efforts and encouraged me and chose my writing for various competitions and things like that. She was the first teacher who read novels aloud to us at that age when you start reading chapter books. At that time, I loved authors like Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary. I loved Lucy Maud Montgomery. And then later, as a teenager, I absolutely adored my English teachers. So there definitely were some inspiring teachers in my life. My high school English teacher was kind of bullied by the men and boys of the school. Not kind of, I would say she was definitely bullied. In those days, I think people excused that type of behavior. But she was bullied for being interested in women's equality and the equality of all people. But she pressed on, and I just adored her confidence in what she believed. And I loved so many of the books I read in high school, all because of her. So I loved the classics, and I loved some of the edgier books that she exposed us to. I continued to write a little bit. I also loved and studied music growing up, so I loved to write songs. And in university, I studied English, creative writing, and music. And I surrounded myself with people, just a few people, but important ones. And we offered each other a lot of support in our creative pursuits. And I'm still connected with those people today. piece of writing I'm most proud of? That's a tough one. I'm going to say that I am most proud, not of a specific piece of writing, but in my consistency to keep writing. Consistency to keep writing. To keep at it, to keep practicing. I think consistency is so important with everything, like writing, relationships, health, career. Being consistent in trying, even if it's a very small effort, trying every day. Look at all these great questions here. So let's move on to the next question. And these ones are from says, how about recommending any writing guidebooks you find helpful? Any books or YouTube authors on technique, genre, dialogue, grammar, and such? Such important questions. They pertain to every writer. I can definitely recommend some writing craft books along with grammar and style books. A few, but not all of these, have appeared in previous videos, and I have them right here. So this one, you might have seen this one before, but it's a little bit different. So it's a classic by Strunk and White, The Elements of Style. But what's different about this one is that it's illustrated by Kalman. Yeah, so every English language writer knows The Elements of Style, which is this book. This much loved classic, now in its 4th edition, will forever be the go-to guide when in need of a hint to make a turn of phrase clearer or a reminder on how to enliven prose with the active voice. Yeah, so this is a classic. Some of this isn't outdated, but things have changed a little bit. I think it's good to just have a copy of this nearby. And I do love these paintings. They make this study into the elements of style a little more interesting. So this is a great one. Put this here for a second. This is a classic as well, On Writing, a memoir of the craft by Stephen King. So this is structured with the memoir in the beginning, which is pretty interesting, and then the toolbox part over here. Gives lots of tips, very helpful and well written, of course, because it's Stephen King. And then these ones I will just show you so that if you want to get this, I'll show you closely like this so you can see the name of the author. Writing Fiction, A Guide to Narrative Craft. This one is more of a, it gets into the writing process, showing and telling, characterization, plot and structure, point of view. Again, a classic. And then The Writing Life. This is a good one, and it's short. And I have one over to the side here. So this one is a grammar book, and I got this actually for a younger person in my life when they were in high school. And it's a fun one. It's this person, speaking of YouTube, I think that she has a YouTube channel. I know she has a podcast, and it's very accessible and fun and memorable, and it just makes there's some pop quizzes in here and stuff. But I found that when I got this for this special person in my life, I also found that I thought it was actually great for anyone, not just a high school student or a university student. You know, it says students here. I think she has other guides, but this is a great book, and she is a great resource, a grammar girl. And there's her name. So that is great for grammar. And here's the last one I pulled from my shelf. I have more, and I could do a video in the future that goes deeper into some of the ideas in these. This one is Francine Prose. It's a great name for an author. Reading Like a Writer, a guide for people who love books and for those who want to write them. Covers a lot about things like close reading, words, sentences, paragraphs, narration, character, dialogue, details, gesture, and so on. So those are my recommendations for grammar and writing craft books. On to the next question here. This one is from Alexandra O. or Alexandreo. And this one asks simply, where are you from? So, I live in North America. And I live in the northeast part of North America. But my ancestors are from Scotland, England, Ireland, France, and Sweden. I live in a city, and I'm a city girl who moved from a big city to a smaller city. And in this smaller city, there are lots of protected lands, and so I positioned myself here because I love both city life and I adore nature, and I get the best of both worlds here. I think between the arts culture a city can offer and the beauty and peace that nature trails can offer. It's just the perfect balance for me. I named my channel Soft Woods after the view outside my writing studio window. I can see a beautiful forest from my window here, and I am inspired and comforted by the soft sounds that the woods offer and the atmospheric and magical feeling it offers. Someone asked recently in another discussion or comment area of another video if I'm a teacher. It was one of my soft study videos where I do a very casual discussion of a topic or author, poet, and write notes as I go along. So for the first few years after I graduated university, I tutored and I taught one-on-one. Once I had made my way into publishing, the publishing field, I had opportunities over the years to lead small workshops, so I could consider myself a facilitator or a workshop guide, but I would not call myself a teacher proper. When I do the soft studies here, I'm thinking of myself as a lifelong learner. I love to study, and I'm never going to stop. I will be the old lady who studies, and I call these soft studies because I just do a light look as opposed to a very deep dive into the topics to keep them relaxing and softly meaningful to those who intend to get rest and sleep. So coming back full circle to the person who requested this video, person Dream Landing asked some additional questions. Here they are. Are there any books in 2024 you're excited for? Is there a book you recommend to everyone? Do you have a writing routine? Any writers you love, and if so, why? Awesome questions. There are quite a few books in 2024 I'm excited about. I'll just write a few that are coming out in 2024. One is Poor Dear. Spelled like that, like deer, the animal. And I think the other one is called Behind You is the Sea. Behind you is the sea. This isn't from this year, but I do want to get my hands on a copy of Wayward. That's just 3 of so many. I also plan to seek out a lot of modern retellings of older fairy tales and myths because I absolutely love contemporary spins on the old fairy tales and myths. As I'm a mood reader too, I want to leave room for spontaneity, but mostly I'm going to chip away at my ever-growing TBR pile, to be read pile. It is so tall, and I will definitely share books I read this year in upcoming videos. So, is there a book you recommend to everyone? A book I recommend to everyone. I'm going to say that I often recommend The Secret History because it has wide appeal. I used to recommend The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka when I was young. I used to love this. Straight out of university, I was just completely enthralled with this. It's tiny. But I don't know if I would really recommend this one now. I would not recommend it, but it's just not the first thing I think of to recommend. But I will say that if I were to recommend something I read in the last year or so to everyone, it would be this book. I love what this author does. Homegoing by Gyasi. There she is. It is such a huge timeline expressed in just this amount of space. It is mind-boggling. I don't know how she did it. And it is really a cool narration because every chapter, this is like a family tree here, and she goes through all of these characters. Each character has their own chapter and tells their own story, but they're all connected, and it is just amazing. I haven't met anyone who didn't absolutely love this book, so this is a great one. Writers I love, as I said earlier, so many to love, too many to list, but of the ones on my desk today, I will share Heather O'Neill. She is one of my absolute favorite authors. So I have 4 of her books here. And somewhere else in my bookshelves, I also have a collection of short stories by her. So she is an amazing storyteller. The language is so poetic, but not in a way that distracts from the story. She always creates such atmospheric realms, if you're into that, and explores dark subjects and gritty settings in a way that is sensitive, empathetic, and accessible. This is The Lonely Hearts Hotel. Her stories are always so unique and fresh. Fresh is the perfect word to describe the scenes and the narrative voice and the images. Her characters are often people who exist on the fringes or margins of society. The Girl Who Was Saturday Night. Her most recent of these ones I have here when we lost our heads. So as I was saying, her characters exist on the fringes or margins of society, but they always seem to exist in realms that feel like magical realism almost, but that is a result of the poetic language she uses. She has the best, most beautiful, luscious sentences, and she has a special way with her extraordinary use of the metaphor. And I just fall into her stories with such trust. So, my writing routine. I continue to have a daily writing practice outside of work. I do write most days, even if it's just a few words or sentences. Some days I can write pages, and other days I might just think about writing, and I've decided that even 5 or 10 minutes of thinking or planning is writing time. There have been many times in my life that I had to write in the evenings after work, but now I prefer to write in the mornings before work and sometimes on breaks. I like to start with pen and paper and getting ideas flowing or planning my session, and then I work in a Word document on my computer, and I often print the pages and edit as I go, which some experts say not to do, but I do anyway. I am fueled by caffeine in the mornings and by tea in the evenings, and I read every day as well. First thing in the morning, and then again right after work when the sun is setting, usually. I write on the weekends too, and when I have more time. I have always been more into the process than the product. If I was told I would never have anything else published again, I would still write daily. It's like air to me. Publication for me is the least enjoyable part. For me, writing is as meaningful as walking in the woods, which is also a daily practice. I love sharing my rough work with my writing groups. And this whole process of writing and walking with and sharing my work with my critique group is for me the most enjoyable part of writing. In other words, the process rather than the product, the finished product. Look at all these gorgeous questions. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you found it relaxing. Thank you so much to all of you who sent questions and to the person who requested this video. And thank you everyone for watching. Until next time, take good care of yourself.